Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
I'm going to give this guy a label. I don't really love labels, but I think this one fits him. He, to me, and I believe all of us, he is an anxiety warrior. He's out there fighting anxiety. He wrote a book, created a workbook as well called Anxiety Quest, because so many of us are crippled by anxiety. It's life-changing. It stops you in your tracks. How do we get past that? We're going to talk a little bit more about that today. He is the guy behind the Healthy Counseling Center. Dr. Ray Smith joins us again on the program. Hey, Ray, how are you?
Well, I'm doing very well. How about you, Steve?
Doing well, doing well. And before we jumped in here, we talked about the triggers, some of the triggers of anxiety. Why don't we begin there?
All right. The work that I'm going to base my thoughts on today is from Dr. Catherine Pittman, and she has written some free worksheets that anybody can print and maybe assess their own thinking that leads to anxiety. For the most part, we get in situations and think, oh, well, that's why I'm anxious. And the work since Viktor Frankl and Albert Ellis and now David Burns, it's all not the situation, but it's how you're thinking about it. So I want to go over some of the stinking thinking that in different situations would produce anxiety. And I think that if people can self-identify with some of these thoughts, then they're empowered. If I think this way, I can change the way that I'm thinking. And in a time when I can feel anxious, well, where did that come from? Well, the IRS is after me. Well, that's a difficult situation. But if you think about it in a different way, then maybe some solutions. I don't deal with this every day, but my CPA does. And if Dr. Ray is going to be the anxiety warrior, I'll let the CPA be the IRS warrior. There are ways to think about situations differently so that you feel differently and then you behave differently. So I want to use Dr. Pittman's work to talk about the different things that trigger anxiety, hoping that the listeners could identify with some of these different things and then have the opportunity to change the way they think about them. And the first one of those is right hemisphere-based anxiety. There is a part of our brain that focuses on negative information, whether that information is visual or auditory, and it becomes the source of some people's anxiety. It also has imaginative capabilities to produce images and scenarios that can be extremely frightening. So it isn't the situation that's frightening, it's how that right hemisphere looks at nonverbal cues and the tone of voice, a person's posture or facial expression. So I want to go over all 6 or 8 of these different things that she's discovered that are part of right hemisphere based anxiety and see if the listeners, oh yeah, I've done that, or my spouse has done that, or gosh, the kids come home from school doing that. So let's see if we can identify them so we can dispute them. The first one, I picture potentially problem situations in my mind, imagining various ways that things could go wrong and how others will react. Well, that's good imagination, but what a waste. Why not be imagining ways to deal with it differently? Another one, I can practically hear what people will say that will upset me. Well, no, you can't. You're not that good of a prophet, even if you've been in a similar situation. I tend to imagine ways that people will criticize or reject me. Well, could you also imagine ways that they would welcome you and enjoy your company? I can feel people judging me at times. Maybe you can, but maybe most of those people are dealing with their own stuff and could care less.
That's an interesting one. Are you psychic? You can feel. How do you know?
Yeah. Well, and most of us can pick up on body language and so forth, but how we interpret it. Is this person being hostile? Is he just ready to cut me to the core? Or is he gathering up things in his own life that don't have anything to do with me? So just to be able to have a different perspective.
Yeah, and I understand. I lived that life back in the day, even as a kid. And if I could go back and speak to my younger self, I would say, Why did you let other people influence you, worrying about what they
Yeah.
think? And easier said than done. So I understand it, but at some point it's just like, let it go. they're, they're not that
Yeah.
important.
They're not. That's the old saying now, that what other people think about you is none of your business. Well, that's pretty freeing.
Mm,
I'm empowered then to change how I think and do things my own way.
mm.
Let's look at a few more of these. I'm good at imagining gory things. I'm very sensitive to the tone of people's voices. I sometimes see images of terrible events occurring. I'm watchful of people's body language and pick up on subtle cues. Well, good that you can do that, but where are the subtle cues that would be triggering joy or invitation for connection instead of just something that could be horrifying? Just kind of making sense about this right hemisphere negativity. Okay,
Sure.
let's look at a couple more. Guilt and shame. Guilt is generally what we feel when we've done something wrong. Shame is what we feel when we are something wrong. It's not just one thing that we have done, but that pervasive pattern that, oh, I should be ashamed of myself because I'm imperfect. And some of the stinking thinking that goes into that, I frequently feel like I'm not measuring up to what I expect of myself. I become very concerned when I contemplate not doing something that I feel I should do. That was one of Albert Ellis's slogans. He had a very filthy mouth. He was a very effective uh, psychotherapist, but he would say, "Don't should on yourself,
Mhm.
and no masturbation." I woulda, coulda, shoulda. Well, I must do this or I mustn't do that. That's stinking thinking. Maybe I could do that, or maybe it's one option that I could do that. Maybe I have several other options too.
I've heard the
Um,
don't shit on yourself. I've never heard the
yes.
masturbation.
Well, it's funny, it's crude, and it's memorable.
It's memorable.
So yeah, I must do this. No, I choose to do this for some good reasons.
Yeah. It almost comes down to the classic, I got to go to work in the morning. No,
Yeah.
I get to go to work in the morning. Imagine if you weren't going to work, how would you support yourself and maybe some of the nicer things that you have? Uh, it, it, you should look at it as a positive. I guess that's where we're going.
Yes, we should, or at least reasonable. Everybody who's unemployed wished that they had to go to work today.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's been below zero here in Spokane. Um, if you don't like your house, well, think of those people under the bridge who would give anything to have your house. So changing your perspective a little bit. A couple more of the guilt and shame. I frequently worry about disappointing people, and I have trouble saying no. If a friend is very upset and I don't come to an event, I might feel guilty for days for disappointing them. It feels awful to know that I've let someone down. It's easy for others to guilt me into doing what they want and manipulate my stinking thinking. It's very hard to admit and discuss my mistakes with others. Once a person criticizes me, I tend to avoid them and I spend less time with that person. These kinds of thoughts are going to produce anxious feelings instead of just, oh, well, that's one way to look at it. And then be curious. What's another way to look at it? Sometimes running that past a friend or a spouse or an employer or a mentor. Oh, well, if I could do my business in a different way that wasn't so codependent, so afraid of people's disapproval or so needy for their approval, I might be able to do things where I'd be very true to my own principles. So, kind of makes sense. The guilt and shame thoughts could produce more anxiety.
Absolutely. And what about we talk about the situations. How about if we look at a few situations and what the trigger may be and how to confront it?
Okay. Well, for example, most people at Christmas have been invited to things that they don't know for sure they want to go to. So if they have a lot of that guilt and shame, I will feel guilty if I don't go. I'll be ashamed of myself if I let somebody down. Who are they going to talk about? Because if I'm not at the party, the easiest one to talk about could be me. That's one way to look at it. On the other hand, if you have time, why not go to that event and enjoy other people? I especially like thinking about others when you go to social events and feel uncomfortable. Because if you look around the room, it doesn't take very long to find that person that's sitting there that feels much more uncomfortable than you do. And to go start a conversation with them and help them to feel a part of the party, it will take away all that self-centeredness of I might be uncomfortable or I might feel guilty if I don't go or if I say the wrong thing. No, let's put the focus on the person that seems very much more uncomfortable or seems more ashamed of themselves than what they should be. That's the person that I want to go to and listen to.
We have some instant feedback. You can reach us instantfeedbacksteve@gmail.com. Lisa checks in from El Segundo, California, says, I have a fear of flying. I worry for weeks before traveling and especially before getting on the plane. How can I turn this around?
Well, now might not be the time, Lisa, to turn it around. We just heard last week about a window blowing out of an airplane or windshield crashing on an airplane. So
Yeah.
there is some risk. If you get out of bed in the morning, there's some risk. I guess elevators are the safest mode of transportation, but I think air traffic is second best. So to think about everything that could go wrong, this could crash and die badly in a burning fire and be miserable going down. And yep, that's one way to look at it. But the reason that you're traveling, if you keep your focus on that goal, why would you take this risk? Well, there's some payoff at the destination. I'm going to go away to do childcare for my son's family while he and his wife are going off to a big event in DC. Well, I don't really want to go on an airplane. I don't want to catch COVID again, but I want to see those 3 grandchildren. And that destination just pulls me in. I don't care about my anxiety. I want to go and hear those giggling girls. I want to play catch with my grandson. Then it's worth it. So cost benefit analysis is a way to think about that airplane ride, Lisa. Why would you risk it? Why bother? Why not drive or take a train? What's worth it to you to get on the airplane? And probably, if you ask, 9 out of 10 people on the airplane are a little bit nervous. They're not nervous about flying, they're nervous about crashing. But if you think, whatever I risk here, it's worth it, because when I get off that airplane, there's going to be, in my case, grandchildren, but wherever you're going, Lisa, to be thinking about, why would you go? What do you hope to accomplish when you get there? So again, my mom used to say people would put the emphasis on the wrong syllable. Well, I don't want to think about the crashing and burning. I want to think about hugging grandchildren when I get to my destination. So the fear of flying may have to do with the situation of flying, but probably, Lisa, it's about how you're thinking about it. So what are my other options? Well, there's millions of people flying today, and all of them are going to get where they're going. Maybe I could relax and listen to some of my favorite music and look forward to that destination when I get to do the reason I'm flying. There's a purpose to it.
I guess it's also the same. Let's say you have a medical test coming up and maybe you had a couple little pains and things going on, but you don't know exactly what's going on. So 2 things can come to somebody's mind: the anticipation of, oh, well, they have to knock me out. How's that going to go? What's it going to feel like? And then the other, what are they going to tell me? What if it's really bad? But look at it the other way. It's people do this all the time. And you may find that there's really nothing wrong going on. And now you have peace of mind. And if there is something, you'll have to confront it and take care of it. But either way, there's no turning back from it. You need the test.
Well, that's a good point. And it is very similar to being on an airplane. You are absolutely out of control. The two people up front have some control over the
Hmm.
airplane, going through some bad weather or something like that. But you're strapped in there at the back. You can't do anything to make it fly left or right. Or when you're going to those medical tests, you can't say, okay, doc, I graduated from medical school. I think you ought to do this test. Nope, you're out of control. And especially if they put you under. So what's going to happen while I'm out of consciousness? Well, the same thing that's happened to all the other patients that they put through this procedure for the years since they've been doing it. The idea is to have the hope finding out what's going on so that you can do something about it. The idea is not to just go and put yourself through anxiety and have a heart attack or something. The idea of being out of control is that you have surrendered yourself into somebody who's competent to fly an airplane or do a surgical procedure, and you're going to trust them.
You bring up a really great point, Ray. Control. Do you think that that's a challenge for a lot of people when it comes to anxiety?
I sure do. Most of us, I'm going to talk about perfectionism here in a minute, but most of us want to have control and think that we can do this better than somebody else. Well, I can't fly an airplane, and I sure can't do. I want to have my way with things. That started when we were little babies. The first time we cried was, I don't want the doctor to spank my bottom, or I don't want to be cold, or I don't want to have a dirty diaper, or I'm hungry. We all want to have our way with things. It's perfectly natural. But what if we surrender? I know that my wife's a nurse, and when she tells me to start doing this or stop doing that, I don't want my way. I want her way. She has my best interests at heart. When I fly to see my grandchildren, I don't want to fly the plane. I want to surrender to the person who's flown there a lot of other times and always landed safely. So the idea that we want our own way, we want to be in control, we want to have some power, that's natural. But what's better than that? If everybody on that airplane said, do you want Dr. Ray to fly this airplane, or do you want the pilot that has all these thousands of hours? They'd all vote for the pilot. Do you want to do your own surgery, or do you want to trust somebody that's done it a lot before? Well, most of us would like to go with the trusted one who's gotten a lot of experience doing it. So surrendering to somebody else's power can be what's best. Maybe I've told you, but that's my favorite ethical question. What's best for all concerned? Well, maybe to go get on that airplane, put the seatbelt on, relax, and say, I'm going to trust them. They don't want to die on this flight any more than I do. So let's kick back and listen to some music and have at least one part of the week where I can relax. I can be out of control. Actually feels good. I'd be a nervous wreck if I was up in the cockpit. I can tell you that, because I wouldn't know which of those little buttons to switch.
I love you, but I would be too.
Okay.
I have this on my wall, and I just put this up here not long ago, and it says, I trust that no matter what happens in my life, it is for my highest good. And it goes on. There's some more things in there. From all things put before us, we shall become stronger and more loving people.
Well, that was it Descartes? Anyway, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Sure.
Kelly Clarkson or somebody sang that song.
Exactly right.
That's a big theme in AA, that when I am going to surrender to the program and I am going to quit drinking and follow somebody else's path, that I'm trusting that it is for my highest good. Well, same thing. I want to go see my grandchildren. Well, the airplane is the way to get there. So trusting that this is going to be for my highest good. When I hear my two granddaughters giggling, I will think, this is the most anxiety reducing situation I could ever be in. So I just want to be present.
Sure. And it's the highest good for all, because it's not just you, it's your grandkids. They get to see you. It brings them joy as it does for you. So it's the highest good for all.
Well, and Lisa, another one of these things that Dr. Pittman is talking about is catastrophizing. When you make your problem into a catastrophe. Maybe what's really going to happen is you're going to be in an airport full of coughing people and on board an airplane with people who may or may not have COVID or influenza or whatever. But if you imagine the worst when you're thinking about how this situation will turn out, I'm thinking about crashing in Colorado rather than landing in Wichita. Then I'm making a mountain out of a molehill. People would think I'm going crazy if they knew the awful thoughts that go through my mind. Well, maybe other people on an airplane would have some of those awful thoughts, or people in the waiting room of the surgical center might have some of those same thoughts. But if you gave all of them a chance, would you like to know what's going on? Would you like to know your diagnosis? Would you like to know what the doctor's going to do about it? No, not until it's over. So we don't have to catastrophize it. We can just ride the waves. And I always like that with Snoopy. You know, he's out there on his surfboard, Cowabunga, and he's letting the wave have him. Here we ski in the mountains and we just are leaning down the hill and letting the mountain have us. Well, if you think about a catastrophe, yeah, I could be a snowball that goes rolling down the hill, but I could also have joy. So to think about it in a different way.
Same thing. I can go back to that medical test because I just got a flash in my head.
Go.
Many times when they put you out for a procedure, in my experience, it's the best sleep I ever had.
Yeah. And
Right?
when they tell you later how long you were under, no kidding. It seemed like I just was there and then I was in the recovery room.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just again, just reframing it in different ways to look at it.
Right. Because there is a catastrophic way to look at it. It could turn out very badly, but there is a way of saying whatever is going to happen, this doctor is going to handle it. Or even on the airplane.
You even look at the odds. All right. And it almost pains me to hear you say that it could turn out catastrophic. I don't think that way. I just don't. Maybe years ago I did, be honest. But how many planes crash? When was the last one? Very, very, very infrequent compared to how many flights fly. How many people are given anesthesia for a procedure every day? Thousands, hundreds, tens of thousands every single day. And what we think is usually not what is. And they've proven this.
No. Right. Well, we talked early on about the 85% of things that people worry about never come to pass.
Exactly.
Well, that's especially true about airplane crashes or dying on the table during surgery or something. It's very rare. The odds are really with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. How about some other thoughts on triggers and situations?
Okay. The catastrophic thinking would be perfect for airplane flight, but that could also be about going to an interview. We talk about being employed. I got to go to work. Well, people want to go to work. They want to get a job. But if you do the catastrophic thinking, what if they laugh in my face? What if they just tear up my resume in front of me? What if, what if, what if? Anytime you hear that what if question, that is the road to anxiety. And as soon as you notice it, oh, well, what else could happen? Well, maybe I could fill a need that they have. The reason they're interviewing people is because they need to hire. And if I was them, I would want to pick me. So I need to show them some way that I can be trusted with it.
Sure.
Another situation that Dr. Pittman talks about is perfectionism. Because if I'm not A+, then I'm F. Well, no, there's B and C and D. There's other ways of grading things between perfect and complete catastrophic failure. So in perfectionistic thinking, you have high standards, you hold yourself to them. You think I am the only one who knows the right way to do something. It's difficult to vary from that approach. Then people consider you conscientious and you're careful as a worker. But when I'm wrong, I'm embarrassed and ashamed because I wasn't perfect. When others are watching me, I'm concerned that I'm going to humiliate myself. And in that situation, you're just waiting for that axe to fall on you rather than saying, this is my chance to show off. Most of us hardly ever perform at the level that we would be satisfied with. There's an old book, The Good Enough Parent. That was a real help to me. You don't have to be perfect. Every intervention you have with your kid doesn't have to be perfect, and they're not going to grow up and be serial killers because you told them, no, don't eat all the Easter candy the first day. Some people have a lot of trouble letting go of mistakes that they've made, and thinking about those things, it gets worse and worse and more catastrophic, that what the consequences of that will be, which is like obsessive thinking, when you can't let go of some thought in your mind, or you do something compulsively to prevent it. In that situation, like germs on an airplane, as soon as you get off the airplane, you want to wash. As soon as you get home, you want to take a shower. Okay, that's not compulsive, that's appropriate. But if the whole time you're on the airplane, you're thinking about it crashing, or the whole time you're in the doctor's waiting room, you're thinking about, these people all look healthier than I do, you're going to have some anxiety. If you think, I'm doing the right thing for my health, or in the case of airline travel, I'm going to a destination where I want to be. So I'm not obsessed about it. I'm just careful about it. I don't want to be ashamed of myself. I want to get there and enjoy the trip and enjoy the destination. The obsessive thoughts, as good as it gets with Jack Nicholson, is the best way to think about it. How silly he looked when he was trying to walk down the sidewalk and not step on a crack, or closing the lock numerous times to make sure that it was locked. It's funny when Jack Nicholson does it. But if you're the one that has the obsessive thoughts, what if something goes wrong and you can't get it out of your mind? Or you're the one doing the compulsive hand washing and your hands bleed because you've done it too much, then it's not only anxiety producing, it is life ruining, because it's at the center of life, like an addiction. And the reason I coined that phrase, anxiety sobriety, is because you want to be free of those things, free of the stinking thinking, and free of the anxiety that comes from it. So let's talk about obsessions with airplane. Worked with a fellow years ago that had to travel for work, and he called me from an airport and said, this time I've got a premonition. I think that this plane is going down. I don't want to get on it. And so I tried to look at it more rationally. What are the odds of this particular plane going down on this particular flight? Well, I'd have a better chance of winning the lottery. Okay, so you're a smart guy, you know numbers, you do that for a living in your business. Your business is going to be disappointed if you don't get on the plane. You're going to be ashamed of yourself. It'll be more difficult to get on the next plane. What do you say? You're a man of faith. What if you just say your prayers and get on the bird and put your seatbelt on and trust the people up front to know what they're doing? Well, that sounds better than worrying about it. So sure enough, he got on the airplane. He called me from the other end and said, I'm so glad we talked about this, because I didn't want to give in to my fear. Well, he meant he didn't want to give in to his anxieties. But the idea was that there's a different way of looking at this. Yeah, if you look at the catastrophic part, the bird could go down, but it's highly unlikely. And even if it does, if everything's going to work out for good, how is this going to be of some benefit to me or my family or my employer or whoever it is I'm going to fly for? There are things that are worse than death. So to think about landing safely and a sigh of relief, and then that reunion. I love that movie, Love Actually, where Hugh Grant is talking about the 9/11 planes, that the phone calls that were made from there were all ones to say, I love you. And that he liked to go to Heathrow Airport and watch people coming in, and all those happy reunions with hugs and kisses. And whoever got off the airplane is very glad that they put their anxiety aside and thought, this trip is worth it to have the hug that's waiting for me on the other end. And it's a good movie to remember that love is actually what it's all about. So to get on an airplane, to take care of your health, that's loving yourself.
Or to see your grandkids.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah. I want to love them too. Yes. And the same thing with the surgery. Nobody wants to go under the knife, but if you want to have the results of knowing what's wrong and what's going to happen to cure it, then it's worth it.
Yeah. Ray, always love your thinking, and all of this, that it's the thoughts and not the situation, I think is a wake-up call for a lot of people with anxiety. Many of us think it's the other way around, or just not just people with anxiety, just people in general, realizing that, oh, that's why that's happening maybe to a loved one. Anxiety Quest. Got about a minute left here. How do we learn more about that?
The easiest way is to go on Amazon and just type in their search bar Anxiety Quest by Dr. Ray Smith, and it will come up, and it will have the paperback book and the workbook, the Audible book, which I love. Dan Levy is the narrator in that, and he has self-confessed that he has struggled with anxiety in the past. And when you hear him read it, you are very glad to hear his voice. There's a Kindle version and an ebook version. I think the Kindle one and the ebook one are free. There are some excerpts from those on my website, draysmith.com. And a little foreshadowing, we're going to have an anxiety sobriety course online, and all of the things that are in the book, plus a whole bunch more, like things that I didn't use in the book from Dr. Pittman, we're going to have things in there to go a little level deeper. So if you got a little anxiety, maybe just reading the book. If you got some substantial anxiety, maybe doing the workbook with the Audible so that you interact with it and answer questions. And then if that's still not enough, then you can do the online course that's coming, or do coaching or counseling or something else to go a level deeper and feel better just by changing your thinking.
It sounds simple, and can be once you reframe it.
It can be. Yeah. Well, the first time we tried to walk, it looked simple to see all the adults doing it, but we fell down.
Yeah.
And the same way on our Anxiety Quest, the first steps are going to be much more difficult than the last ones. And when you see any great quest, Star Wars is a great example. It starts off badly with good people dying, and it ends with bad things happening to bad people. And you have to be committed to that journey that, okay, I want to do something that's going to make a difference. I want to love, I want to serve, I want to give.
Always great talking with you.
Well, thank you, Steve. It's good to be here with you. And if Lisa or other people have questions they want to follow up, it's easy. Dr. Ray at draysmith.com. I'll answer those emails personally. And if I can help in some other way, I'd like to do that.
Yeah, I know you do. And every time we get together, but just letting people know, it's draysmith.com, correct?
Yes, it is.
Excellent. Thank you for being here. Learned a lot today. Really did.
Good. Well, we'll hope that being aware of some of those anxiety triggers gives people another way to look at them. So it doesn't have to be catastrophic or obsessive. It can be, oh, it's time for me to look at this a different way. Then I'll feel differently and I'll behave differently.
Appreciate it. Thanks. And we'll talk next time we get together, Ray.
Okay. Looking forward to it, Steve. Thank you.
We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Homes for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.